There you go. Color guard. Halt. Right. Face.
Quick, march.
Company, present.
Halt.
Arms.
Present your firearms.
Retire the colors. March. Left, right, left, right turn, march, left, right, left, right, left, march time, march.
Good morning. Good morning. My name's Craig Clark. I'm the president of the Portsmouth Historical Society and a founding member of the Battle of Rhode Island Association and the Butts Hill Fort Restoration Committee. It's, I have to tell you a little brief history going back 3 years, if you don't mind, because to sit here today and understand, to see everyone here is really warming. 2020, as a member of the Historical Society, we received a few inquiries regarding the fort. One was from locals wondering what's going on. There's some vandalism or people doing donuts in the middle of the field, which was of concern. And the other one was from the hunting militia out of Long Island, New York. They wanted to come up and do a cleaning of the fort and just try to start some restoration process. And that really rubbed me the wrong way and a few members of the Historical Society. So we decided to, in August of 2020, in the middle of COVID, we sponsored just a get-together. We had Jim Garman speak about the history of the fort. And at that time, we had a difficult time finding a raised area to talk from. So we showed up, and about 40 to 50 residents showed up, spaced 10 feet apart with wearing masks. God, that seems like a long history ago, doesn't it? But as a result of that, we created the Butts Hill Fort Restoration Committee. And since that time, so the Butts Hill Fort started under the Historical Society, and it really took off very quickly. And so much so that we decided that we found that there was such a lack of knowledge, especially online knowledge and local knowledge of Butts Hill Fort and the history of the Siege of Newport and the Battle of Rhode Island. So our intention was to create now the Battle of Rhode Island Association to help spread the education, work together with other like-minded individuals towards our all common goal, and to restore this fort as a centerpiece or a location where folks can come and start the journey to learn about the Battle of Rhode Island. They can venture down to the 1st Rhode Island Regiment Monument, down to Newport, down to Heritage Park in Portsmouth, over to the Varnum Armory in East Greenwich. These are all of our now partners, of which we have 45 partners as part of the Battle of Rhode Island. So again, oh, thank you. I guess I don't need it anyway. But since starting the group again 3 years ago, the Restoration Committee has held over 12 cleanups, hauled out 20 plus dumpsters of debris. We've had 160 volunteers on site at one point in time. We've created the most comprehensive website related to the Battle of Rhode Island. And we've partnered with over 45 organizations. Did I mention the $180,000 that we've raised today? Which we've also started the master planning process. So on the master planning process, we have our landscape plan in place at this point. So we're really excited to continue this journey, and after that first meeting 3 years ago, to see this many people here today is just, again, it's unbelievable to see how much clearing's taken place. We actually have a fort. We can see it. I hope you all enjoyed walking the paths and just admiring what was done 250 years ago. And if you stand on the edge and you look at Newport Bridge, you can understand how important this property was during the Battle of Rhode Island, that this was the headquarters for General Nathaniel Greene and General Sullivan to oversee the battle. So I just wanted to thank, number one, all of the committee members. If you could raise your hands in the distance, I'm sure you're on the exterior. Paul Murphy, please stand up. And it takes a lot of effort to do what we've done so far. So thank you very much. 100 years ago, they held a 1923, obviously, we're here to celebrate Dr. Roderick Terry and him saving the fort from development. And there'll be some talks about that with Jim and Mike Simpson in a second. But another important event happened 85 years ago. It was the birth of Mr. James Garman, our first speaker for today. Jim was born in 1938. Not that many people were there for it, unfortunately, Jim. But Jim is an undergrad. He has an undergrad degree in history from Gettysburg College, a master's degree in Emory University in Civil War. Jim he's a retired naval officer. He's been a retired history teacher at Portsmouth Abbey School. He's been a professional photographer, a master gardener, former president of the Portsmouth Historical Society, and Portsmouth Town Historian for the past 12 years. And most importantly, happy birthday, Jim. So Jim's going to talk about... By the way, this is a card that Paul created for Jim, and happy birthday.
Thank you all. Wow, what a nice turnout. This is terrific. I've one question for you people first before I start. How many of you have never been here before? Raise your hands. Yeah, that's what I figured, because this place is hidden in this town. By the way, if you can't hear me on this microphone, I'll turn it. If you can't hear me on this microphone, just wave or something, because I usually don't even use a microphone. I don't need it. My job today for a little bit of this time is to talk a little bit about what happened here in 1778. I've been involved in the Battle of Rhode Island things for quite some time. I was on the committee and the photographer in 1978 when we had the 200th anniversary. And then I was also the photographer and a member of the committee in 2003 when we had the 225th. Hopefully I'll still be around for the 250th in a few more years. Okay, so Butts Hill Fort. It was named for a man named Enoch Butts who built a believe it or not, a windmill on this hill. Back in the 18th century. The main settlement of Portsmouth was down over the hill that way, around Town Pond, when they first came here. But within a very short period of time, they moved further south, and particularly people who were interested in merchant life and sailing ships and trade set up on the wharves in Newport. And so Newport was founded a year after Portsmouth, and we people in Portsmouth like to brag about that fact. First of all, as far as the Battle of Rhode Island was concerned, Newport was considered a strategic port by the British. There were several of them, 5 altogether, at the time, the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And they were, not necessarily in order, Boston, Newport, New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston, South Carolina. And those were ports that the British were very much concerned about maintaining control over. And so the British troops came to Aquidneck Island in December of 1776. And they remained here on the island, occupying the island, until October of 1779. So almost 3 years the British were here, and the locals didn't like the British very much, because the British moved them out of their houses. They used their houses for barracks and things like that, and they did not endear themselves to most of the community. There were some Tories here who supported the British, but generally they were not supported. So the Americans early on had built a fort on this hilltop, and the British decided to enlarge it and make it much more significant. And the British title for this hill was not Fort Butts, but rather Windmill Hill. And that's what that was called. In all the British records, that's how it shows up. So I'm going to give you a sort of short-term discussion of the battle as it was fought. It's usually about an hour and 20-minute lecture, but I'll try to do it in about 20 minutes. So bear with me. The Americans were interested in getting the British out of Newport, and they decided, as Washington was over in New York, he decided he would send some troops over here to try to expunge the island from the British, and that was the plan. So that campaign was launched in the spring of 1778. Now, at the same time, the Americans, after having been successful against the British, had engendered an alliance with the French. The French were always ready to fight against the British, anytime, anywhere. They had something like 5 wars against each other in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. So the French were involved. The French decided they would send troops, and they sent a fleet under Count d'Estaing over here to support the Americans. They came to New York first, and Washington said, things are kind of settled here. Why don't you go over to Newport and help the Americans liberate Newport? So the French came this direction, d'Estaing and his fleet, to try to get rid of the British off the island. In command of the American troops was a man by the name of General John Sullivan, who was from New Hampshire. And he was in command of the American troops all the way through this campaign. Assisting him, Washington sent the Marquis de Lafayette to help out. And that's an important consideration for later on, I'll mention. So the troops gathered in Tiverton, right across the river, on the other side, for those that know the local area, on the other side of the Stone Bridge, in that area, around Fort Barton, which is another Revolutionary War site over there. And you should visit that, by the way, because they have a big tower, and you can really get up high and see the whole layout of everything. Maybe we'll have a tower someday. Get around these trees. I have photographs of this fort taken in 1908, 1909, and there wasn't a tree on this property anywhere. It kind of looks really different. Okay, so the campaign mainly was in August of 1778. And when the British realized there was a threat of the Americans coming at them, they decided to move south on the island. So they took all their troops back to a line, sort of on the Newport-Middletown line, although there wasn't a Middletown at that time, by the way. So that back in that area. So the Americans had some scouts that came out and said, hey, the British evacuated Fort Butts. Why don't we go now? We're not supposed to go till tomorrow, but let's go now. The French, meanwhile, were in Jamestown, off Jamestown. They landed their troops on Jamestown, and they found out the Americans had crossed over a day early. They were very upset about that. And they decided they were going to put their troops back on the ships. So the initial effort of a Franco-American effort on this battle didn't work out very well. So what happened then is that Sullivan's troops, 8th of August, 9th of August, Sullivan's troops crossed over by boat. There were no bridges in those days and no ferry. Well, there were ferries, but couldn't carry an army across on a ferry. The 9th of August, Sullivan's troops crossed over and came to this area and occupied and abandoned Butts Hill Fort. The French went out to sea, and meanwhile they said they're going to engage the British fleet at sea. They'll take care of that. So that was the plan. Later on, about a week later, the Americans decided to move south. And why not move south and push the British out to sea from Newport Harbor? And that was the plan on the 15th of August. However, what happened was that on the 21st of August, there was a hurricane. Nobody called them hurricanes in those days, but there was a hurricane which totally devastated the French fleet. The flagship, the Languedoc, was dismasted. It was a 60-gun ship, and it lost all of its masts and its rudder, and it had to be towed. And the French decided, because of all the damage, that they would move the French fleet to Boston for repairs. And the Americans said, no, you can't do that. We need you. We need your troops here. The Americans had about total, in the whole battle, the Americans had almost 10,000 troops here. The British had about 6,000. And so what happened was the hurricane devastated not only the French fleet and the British fleet, but also the Americans. Can you imagine, for 2 days, camped on the hillside out here in a tent during a hurricane? It's bad enough when we're sitting in a house these days and have to ride out a hurricane. A lot of the troops were signed up for a 20-day enlistment. Okay, time to go home. And a lot of the American troops did go home. And Sullivan's forces were reduced to about 5,000 in the next few days, because primarily of the hurricane and the fact that their ammunition got all wet. They couldn't do much. So the Americans, however, had moved south, and they decided after the hurricane that they would go back north, back to a line right where we are, with Fort Butts being a command center for Sullivan and his army. The rest of the troops were scattered out. There were several engagements with the British as the British followed them out. Engagements at either end of Union Street, if you know where that is, at Redwood Farms, and also at the Historical Society. The engagements at the Historical Society caused almost as many casualties as the actual big battle that was fought later that day. This is August 29th, 1778. So the confrontations then, the British pulled back. They came up Middle Road and up the East Main Road and up the West Main Road and came back to Turkey Hill. You need to learn the geography around here. Turkey Hill is that way, and the easiest way to explain that is that's where the town's compactor is. Okay. Another hill was Almy Hill. Almy Hill's over there. It's up above the Abbey where the windmill is, and the cross above the Abbey over that way. That's Almy Hill. Lehigh Hill is over here where the scenic overlook is, over where, I'll use the Rhode Island term, over where Kaiser used to be. And, of course, there was Quaker Hill, and hopefully everybody knows where that was, right where the Quaker Meeting House is. So the Americans fell back to those lines, and in some cases kept going further in this direction. At 9 o'clock, and a lot of this action was fought on along Union Street, was fought at like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. By 9 o'clock, they had settled into two lines. One, as far as the British were concerned, from Quaker Hill to Turkey Hill to Almy Hill. Okay, and the Americans were back this side of that line. In fact, mostly around the southern part of Fort Butts. Now, there also were British ships in the bay, and the British ships launched cannonades against Fort Butts. There are cannonballs around here. On the British left, over on that side, were mostly Hessians. Hessians were armed volunteers. They were paid by the British. They came from the state of Hesse in Germany. which was kindly disposed toward the British. And some of their British ancestors of the royal family had come from that area, so they were closely tied to them. The Hessians came over to what we would call today, again, I'm using some modern landmarks, but Corey's Lane and the Abbey over in that area. The Hessians were there. The Americans were down the valley, across the stream, and up the other side at Lehigh Hill. Okay. The stream, however, and we saw this on some maps yesterday, and some of them are over there. The stream was a swamp, and that was a problem. It is no longer a swamp. It's a tiny little stream right now, but it's still there. So a big part of the battle that was fought was on that site, with the Hessians coming down off Elmies Hill, crossing the stream, and going up toward Lehigh Hill. And in that fighting, on the American side, was the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, which was the Black Regiment, who fought extremely valiantly in that area. They were, in a lot of cases, they were former slaves who had been recruited into the army because Rhode Island didn't have enough troops to put in the army. So they recruited ex-slaves and gave them their freedom, theoretically, for fighting in the battle. They repulsed 3 charges by the Hessians down off Elmies Hill. And that was the fiercest part of the battle. That was really the main part of it. They also fought right behind me at a distance off Turkey Hill, down into the valley there, and up the other side. They never really got very close to the fort itself. This was a fairly protected area. Plus, they had a lot of cannons on that side also, which helped keep the British away. They also fought in the vicinity of the Quaker Meeting House over on the East Main Road. A couple years ago, we saved the Quaker Meeting House, by the way, because someone wanted to sell it, and someone wanted to buy it, and he thought it was a perfect place for a gas station. The Historical Society intervened, and we were able to do research. I did research and found that the people who claimed to own it, which was a friends meeting in Ohio, they said they claimed ownership, and I looked at all the deeds and everything and found out that, and turned it over to a lawyer, and found out that they did not. So it remained, after being closed for about 3 years, it reopened, and it's still functioning, thank God. Okay, so by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the fighting of the Battle of Rhode Island was pretty much over. They were picking up their wounded, burying their dead, and the lines fell back pretty much to where they had been, that is Turkey Hill and up here, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And everybody kind of rested on their arms. They had been fighting, shooting at each other, since about 6 o'clock in the morning. Now it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a very hot day. It's August 29th. And so they decided to sort of sit for a while. Buried the dead, took care of the wounded. And Sullivan got the word. Sullivan got the word that the British were underway with a number of ships and 4,500 more troops to resupply Newport. And they were pretty much off Point Judith at that point. So they were getting pretty close. So Sullivan decided, and it makes sense that he did decide to do this, to evacuate his troops. So he took his troops back across where they had come to Tiverton to get away from the British. They crossed, and supervising the withdrawal was none other than Lafayette, who had gone to Boston after the French went to Boston to try to encourage d'Estaing to bring his troops back. And Lafayette missed the battle. He got back at the time when it was over, and he did control the supervision of the withdrawal from the island. So the battle was over. The American troops, which once numbered over 10,000, were down to about 5,000. The British and the Hessians were about 6,000. I've seen about 10 different lists of statistics on killed, wounded, and missing. And I don't trust any of them, but one that I found that seemed to recur more often was that the British losses, killed, wounded, and missing, were 1,000. The American losses around 500. That's conjectural. The Battle of Rhode Island was significant because it was the last fought battle between the British and the Americans in New England. After this, the war went south. Virginia, the Carolinas, and down in that area, until it finally ended in 1781 with Yorktown and 1783 with the peace treaty. Lafayette referred to the battle, in writing about it later, he referred to the battle as, quote, the best fought action of the war, unquote. And he made that remark when he came back here in, I think it was 1823, and he got a tour of the battlefield at that point. The greatest significance of the Battle of Rhode Island is the fact that it was fought right here. We're standing in it, and that's really important. And from a number of points in the town, such as Butts Hill, Turkey Hill, Quaker Hill, Almies Hill, Lehigh Hill, if you let your imagination wander, you can really recreate this and see what it was like. And the efforts of the committee now to re-educate people about this battle is working, because we have a wonderful crowd here today, and that's great. And hopefully that will keep it going. So you can recreate in your mind's eye what happened here. Before we get too many housing developments in Portsmouth, you can still see open space. And we're very fortunate to have it. We're very fortunate to have a hard-working committee who has amazingly cleaned this place up in the last 2 years. I'm sure we have some before pictures someplace, but it really has improved tremendously, and we're going to keep it going. So I appreciate your patience in listening to me describe this quick account of the battle. And the one thing I will finish with is that in around 1910, a man by the name of Benjamin Hall owned all this land, and he was people were considering what to do with it. And so the main thing that was decided, and I've seen the plat, was 200 house lots. Okay. Now, one of the things that would have been difficult, because one of the things I didn't mention before is we're sitting on top of a coal mine. If you look at this ground closely, you see slate. There's a lot of slate around here. And there were 3 coal mines in Portsmouth. That's another lecture that I give. And one of them came from over on this side by the East Main Road and came under here. It wasn't a very successful one. But there is slate very close to the surface on this. You'll see that when you walk around. Anyway, thank you for your patience. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the Battle of Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Jim mentioned the housing development. We actually have the plat and the plot of the land that was going to be developed without Roderick Terry's intervention. So really significant. I also want to recommend, again, discuss the volunteer effort. We have a nice, Paul Murphy created a great collage of pictures of people that have participated over the past 3 years, and all the donors and help, including the town of Portsmouth and Mike Whipple, a lot of people. It's too many to actually discuss, but Paul did a great job of putting on a board, so please look at that when you have a chance. Today we're here to celebrate, again, the 100th anniversary of the saving of the fort and the rededication by Roderick Terry. And we have a great speaker today. Michael J. Simpson is a public historian from Providence, Rhode Island. He has graduate degrees in history from New York University and Brown University, and currently teaches U.S. history at Johnson & Wales University. Michael serves on nonprofit boards at Smith's Castle, Newport Middle Passage Project, and Bristol Middle Passage Project. He is the founder of Hidden History Tours, a walking history tour of downtown Newport. Hidden History Tours most recently started a new project funded by the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities. On this day in Rhode Island history, available on social media. This research on Dr. Terry was funded by the Battle of Rhode Island Association and the Redwood Library and Athenaeum. We can pronounce that one. Mike's article on Terry will be on the Battle of Rhode Island website next week under original articles. Michael Simpson.
Hello, everybody. Also, one other attribute of myself, I'm a graduate of Middletown High School, so I just want to say go Islanders in a room full of patrons. Good place to start. And I also was voted 2004 Middletown High School Best Actor, so just let me know if I'm not projecting enough, but I think I got it under control. All right, cool, so let's take this. All right, so today we gather to commemorate the 245th anniversary of the Battle of Rhode Island and the centennial anniversary of the dedication of Butts Hill Fort by the Reverend Dr. Roderick Terry. This brief speech will reflect on Terry's profound contributions to preservation in Rhode Island, a short history of the fort itself, and the proven connection between privilege and preservation. Now, Roderick Terry was not simply a man of privilege. He was also a visionary preservationist whose place in society allowed him the ability to recognize the importance of safeguarding our shared historical heritage. Born into the life of wealth and influence to John Taylor Terry, an early director of Western Union, Roderick, known as an apostolic son of a millionaire in the New York newspapers, utilized his inherited wealth and passion to leave an indelible mark on Rhode Island's historical landscape. His unwavering commitment to the preservation of significant landmarks and material objects has shaped our understanding of the past and enriched our state's cultural tapestry. Terry graduated from Yale College in 1870 as both a member of the exclusive fraternity known as Skull and Bones and Yale's elite rowing team. His affinity for sailing and yachting landed him here in Newport, over there in Newport, where he spent many of his collegial summers vacationing. It was during one of these excursions that he met Linda Marquand, the daughter of Henry G. Marquand, a director and founder of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan, and the director of the Redwood Library from 1895 to 1902. Roderick and Linda married in 1875 and became regular summertime residents of Newport at Henry's Mansion, known as Linden Gate. And that's used to be on Old Beach Road, now burned down, 1973. And in 1882, the College of New Jersey, now Princeton, awarded Terry a doctorate of divinity, hence Reverend Dr. Roderick Terry. 1904, Terry retired from his career as a clergyman in Manhattan, having served in the pulpit of the South Reformed Church in Madison Avenue, which at the time was known as one of the oldest and wealthiest churches in New York City. Terry's retirement took him to his favorite vacation home in Newport, and he quickly became involved in local organizations like the Redwood Library and Athenaeum. There it is. Elected as president in 1916, and the Newport Historical Society elected as president in 1919. He served in both positions until his death in 1933. During his tenure, he oversaw the construction of the statue dedicated to the landing of Rochambeau at Kings Park, the preservation of several important historic buildings like the Redwood Library itself, the Wanton Lyman Hazard House, and the Old Colony House, all in Newport, the Sherman Windmill in Middletown, Fort Barton, as previously mentioned, in Tiverton, and Butts Hill Fort, where we stand today. In 2023, Butts Hill Fort remains as one of Terry's most significant endeavors. This historic site, which rests within approximately 11 acres on 3 separate plots owned by the town of Portsmouth, is nestled atop a hill between what is now known as West Main and East Main Road. For at least 7,000 years, and into today, this land has served as the traditional homelands and summer destination for the ancestors of the Narragansett and Wampanoag peoples. In the 18th century, it served as an important role as a strategic foundation during the Revolutionary War. Thus, Butts Hill Fort and the land around it have witnessed pivotal moments in our nation's history and beyond. During the Revolutionary War, Butts Hill Fort played a vital role as a military stronghold, specifically during the Battle of Rhode Island. During this battle and its prelude, in August of 1778, the fort served as the headquarters for General John Sullivan and the American troops, including the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, the first predominantly black and indigenous regiment in the history of the United States. Calling that regiment a black regiment is a little bit of a misnomer because there were sizable amounts of indigenous folks as a part of that regiment. Those indigenous folks would have presumably been serving for many years, French and Indian War, years before that. So when we talk about them, pushing back on the Hessians for 3 drives, well, that's because there were native men who had had decades of war experience, and they then taught the enslaved African men that war experience, and they were able to defend on 3 tries some of the most well-trained soldiers on the planet, the Hessians. I think that's really, really impressive. Somebody can correct me, but I believe the general of those Hessians was quoted as saying they did those 3 drives, and he said, if I sent them on a 4th drive, they would have beheaded me. So they were not going to be doing that anymore. So yeah, and on August 29th, 1778, the fort witnessed the intense Battle of Rhode Island, which was an attempt by American troops in the French Navy to retake Aquidneck Island from occupying British troops. And though it ultimately failed, the event shaped the course of the war and embodied the spirit of resilience and determination that defined the American role in the conflict. On August 29th, 1923, on the 145th anniversary of the Battle of Rhode Island, Roderick Terry delivered a poignant speech during the dedication ceremony on this very site. In his address, he spoke of the fort's historical significance, emphasizing the sacrifices made by those who fought for independence from Great Britain. This generous donation was commemorated with a military reenactment and an accompanying ceremony attended by thousands of people. Terry's words, captured in historical records, echo through time, reminding us of the enduring importance of preserving our past. He remarked that, quote, these properties belong to the people of the state and of America, end quote. This underscored Terry's belief that our historical heritage should always be accessible and cherished by all. In fact, as part of his dedication, he included 3 specific stipulations that were to be followed. Otherwise, the property would automatically default from the Newport Historical Society to the state of Rhode Island. These stipulations were 1, that it maintain said premises as a memorial or monument to the memory of those who fought in the American Revolution, and specifically in the Battle of Rhode Island. 2, it shall always retain the name of Butts Hill Fort. And 3, that it shall never be used as a means of obtaining pecuniary gain or profit. In his dedication speech, Terry remarked that the event was, quote, the realization of the dream of many years to preserve the fort for future generations as a reminder of what our ancestors had done to give us our independence. He also wished that those who should visit the fort, quote, would find their patriotism aroused. For in spite of what is the opinion of many today, we believe thoroughly in patriotism and that there are few nobler qualities to inspire great deeds. Terry closed his speech by expressing the hope that in the years to come, many might visit this interesting spot and find here inspiration ever for better living. So today, as we stand here on what was once a battleground, we honor Terry's dedication and vision. His generosity and commitment to preserving our history have left an enduring impact on Butts Hill Fort and numerous other landmarks throughout Rhode Island. Terry's contributions were not limited to his financial support. However, he invested his time, intellect, and unwavering passion to ensure that future generations of all backgrounds could have access to our shared past. As we commemorate the centennial anniversary of the dedication of Butts Hill Fort, let us recommit ourselves to the preservation of our historical heritage. May we draw inspiration from Roderick Terry's unwavering dedication and recognize that the true power of privilege lies not in personal gain, but in using resources to safeguard the stories, artifacts, and landmarks that connect us all to our common past. In conclusion, let us pay tribute to the Reverend Dr. Roderick Terry, a visionary preservationist whose contributions have helped to shape Rhode Island's historical landscape. As we honor the centennial anniversary of the dedication of Butts Hill Fort, let us remember the profound historical significance of this site and its role in the Revolutionary War. And finally, let us not forget that this land has always been native land, home to the ancestors of the Pecasset, Narragansett, and Wampanoag peoples for thousands of years. Through all our collective efforts, not just the privileged few, let us ensure that the legacy of Butts Hill Fort endures, allowing future generations to learn, reflect, and find inspiration in the remarkable shared narratives of our past. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the life of Roderick Terry, the history of Butts Hill Fort, and the long-standing power of preservation. Together, let us carry forward Terry's vision and commitment to increasing access to our shared histories for the benefit of generations of all backgrounds to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. Really, that was wonderful. I wanted to present this to Mike and to Jim and to all of our speakers today. This is our third coin, and we hope to be a series of 12 coins. This one is commemorating Dr. Terry. The first one has been sold out. The second one's still available, but we hope to, over the next up until 2028, have a total of 12 coins for collection, and they're available for sale at our information desk. So thank you again, Mike. Really appreciate that. Yeah. Wonderful job. This starts our dedication portion of the program. We don't have too much time left, folks. I know it's hot. I'd like to introduce Mr. Chuck Levesque from the Portsmouth Town Council.
I want to bring the greetings of President Kevin Aguirre and the Portsmouth Town Council to this gathering. When I was asked by the president to do this, I contacted the folks and said, what do you want me to say? And they said, oh, well, just do whatever you want. A foolish idea. I do want to mention a couple of things. This is the town I grew up in. In 1919, down over there, my father was born in a house which is now Moriarty's package store, if we're using current references. He was born there, as happened in those days. And he was the youngest of 4 people in the family that was a part of the incursion, if you will, of the Irish, French, Catholics coming into the town of Portsmouth. I bring that up because you ask yourself sometimes, why exactly did this happen in 1923? I don't know, but I wonder. At that time, unfortunately, within this community, and keep in mind, 1923 was 5 years post the Great War. 5 years post the World War, and that was known at the time as the war to end all wars. Why exactly in that period of time did somebody take it upon themselves to commemorate a monument, if you will, reflecting war? One of the things that was happening in this community, in this state, was that there was a nativist movement that was anti a lot of the people coming into this community, and this was entirely in the state and perhaps in the nation. So at this point, Reverend Terry decides that he wants to harken back and dedicate a field or remember a time of ancient patriotism, a time when the community actually fought for the liberty, for the freedom, for all of the people in this area. And so I think it was, in fact, a statement by him to remember our ancient roots and to remember who we are. And I think, if I'm right about that, it was a noble gesture to the people of that time, and hopefully to the people of our time, to forget the differences we have and remember the uniqueness that we have of being one great nation. I also want to just mention a couple of things. Mr. Garman, if he had his full hour and 20 minutes, may have mentioned to the north, yes, is an area dedicated called Founder's Brook. There was a stone that was put there some 200 years after the founders showed up. in a point of pride, Portsmouthites say that it is the compact they created was the first democratic government of European origin in this new land. It's worth noting that the taking of this land was with the participation and agreement of the native people who lived here, brokered by Roger Williams. So it was not like some others. It was in fact an agreement. And also that the leader of the group was in fact a woman, Anne Hutchinson. The other thing I would like to just quickly mention is that in that direction, and I believe Mr. Garman and Mr. Simpson very accurately pointed out, is the Black Regiment Memorial. And a week and a day from now, the 27th of August, at 3 o'clock at the premises, there will be a ceremony that has been going on, 1974. I have a prompter. I think that I've been going there since 1974. Okay, so, but it recognizes the contribution of Native Americans, and that is certainly true, and people who were promised freedom, some of which was delivered, much of which was not, but who fought bravely and nobly on the side of the idea of freedom and of the idea of a community that would recognize each of us as equal. A phenomenal concept that really is the basis of our American vision, dream. But anyway, so if you have a chance, I'm the head of the commission on that. We all wear a lot of hats in the town of Portsmouth. But in any event, if you have an opportunity, next Sunday at 3 o'clock will be that. All right. And the only other thing I'm assuming that the other state leaders will be introduced, but I do want to recognize our town administrator, Mr. Rayner, who is who helps manage all of what we do, and particularly my foolishness. Okay. But again, thank you. Welcome to my town. All right, and I hope that you are, as Lincoln said, re-energized with an additional and new vision of what it means to be an American and what it means to be appreciative of everybody's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, very much. Oh, they're coming up. Okay, we have a surprise today. Michelle McGaw and Terry Cortran, our two state representatives, have a nice surprise for the Battle Rhode Island Association, the Butts Hill Fort restoration. Dick, come on up here.
Good morning, everybody. It really is nice to see everybody here today. And we're not on the agenda, so we'll try to be quick. But we did want to just make a little presentation on behalf. What I want to say is thank you first to all of the volunteers that have made this happen. I know your dedication to the history of Rhode Island and the future of Rhode Island. I don't want that to go unrecognized, so I want to say thank you. So because of that, Rep. Corfrind and I are bringing with you a citation from the House of Representatives. And the citation states, be it here known to all that the Rhode Island House of Representatives hereby offers its sincerest congratulations to the Battle of Rhode Island Association in recognition of the joyous and momentous occasion of Dr. Roderick Terry Centennial Celebration at Butts Hill Fort on August 19th, 2023 in Portsmouth, Rhode Island.
And And in addition, we would like to present you with a treasurer. Okay, Dick. With a legislative grant, also on behalf of the House of Representatives for $3,000 to continue the efforts of your work. So, thank you.
I'd like to now introduce our state senator, Linda Ujifusa, please.
Thank you. I want to say thanks a lot to the reps and for making me look bad. I do not have a check to present today. However, I did make a request. So good morning. I'm honored to be here and to help celebrate this 100th anniversary of Dr. Terry's purchase and preservation of this site. Many thanks to all the volunteers of the Battle of Rhode Island Association and the Portsmouth Historical Society for all you do, including organizing today's event. I'll start with a quote because, as Oscar Wilde noted, quotation is a serviceable substitute for wit. Quote, "Men often oppose a thing merely because they have no agency in planning it, or because it may have been planned by those whom they dislike." Close quote. So that's wisdom from Alexander Hamilton before he became a rapper on Broadway. Hamilton is telling us good news. Fort Butts will be extremely successful because, first, local volunteers like you here and people from the 45 statewide partners had or will have agency in planning. Everything from how to clear out invasive plants to how best to recognize the 1st Rhode Island Regiment to who is bringing the coffee and snacks. And all skills welcome. I think I'll be able to fill that coffee and snacks position. And second, we like our planners. We like them because they share a fundamental love of history, and we're kind of nerdy. And I look forward to meeting more of you and continuing to work with you. And I, too, have brought a citation from the Rhode Island Senate. It says, "Be it hereby known to all that the Rhode Island Senate offers its sincerest congratulations to the Battle of Rhode Island Association in recognition of the 100th anniversary of Dr. Roderick Terry's foresighted philanthropic purchase and preservation of the Butts Hill Fort area for the purpose of promoting education about and appreciation of our Rhode Island American Revolutionary War heritage." And that's presented this day, August 19th, 2023. Thank you so much.
Hi, excuse me. Paul Murphy, can I get all the volunteers up here? The guy, if you're a core volunteer from the Butts Hill Fort Committee, can you pop up? Jethro, I see you. Scuba. That's right. Chris Rowe. Anybody? Jonah, Seth, Dick. Anyone who's either been clear up? There's an entire list up there, Ed. Come on up. There's a list at the check-in desk that has, we try to go back at the last 3 years and get everybody who's actually contributed at least one time on one of the clearings, and that includes Linda and Mark and Terry. I mean, not just supporting us as the town, Mr. Rayner also, I mean, letting us do things here to get us where we are, but also actually physically coming out and working in the mud and in the bad weather. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate all the support from the town. I think we've done pretty good work here in 2023. It's a huge team effort. I'd really like you to get out and see more of the displays and demonstrations here from the Rhode Island Reds. So please, the ceremony's not over. The day is to wander the earth here, both paths, and also to see the cannon demo, which is going to be coming up, the period folks. For tours, it's going to be over in the tent where Gloria Schmidt and Rich are showing fort building. So if you want to go on a tour, an actual guided tour, we've got volunteers to do that. So just gather at the tent, and when we have a group enough, we'll take you on a guided tour. So I just wanted to get that word in. But for a picture, and if anyone of you all want to come up and be in this picture also, come on up. If you consider yourself a volunteer. You've been here. Absolutely. Mark, don't hide. Come on, get on up here. So we're going to get one team shot of this event because we really did want to make a deal out of bigger deal out of the Terry, specifically the Roderick Terry event. Of the Roderick Terry event. Mrs. Johnson was here for one. To commemorate it. So this one doubles down as both. It's a centennial of that, but it's also for the entire team effort. So I will stop talking, and we're going to take a good picture, and here's Craig.
I would just like to read this. This is paraphrasing Dr. Terry. Today, August 19th, 2023, on the 100th anniversary of the saving of Butts Hill Fort from development, we preserve Butts Hill Fort and its fortifications to serve all future generations as a reminder of what our ancestors had done to give us independence, and that these fortifications were not given as a personal possession of their own, so much as a trust, which we hold for the community. Thank you all. This is a celebration cake and a birthday cake all in one.
Oh, boy.
So you're all welcome to have some cake as well. Someone take it? Okay.
We're trying to get a picture here. Okay, volunteers this way. Scuba, don't disappear, man.
Yeah. Be careful, you're going to fire the cannon.
Thank you all for coming today. And if you'd like to get more involved with the group effort, we have a sign-in table. We'd love to get you on our mailing list, and we have a lot of work to do. Next year, we hope to open up the Battle of Rhode Island Vista, so we can actually sit there and stand there and see the fortifications from the high school and fire some cannons off at homecoming day and whatever we can do. So that's my goal anyway. So thanks again for coming, folks. Jim Garmin, you got to cut your cake.
Wow.
Whoops.
Breaking prime.
Good.